Do you ever hear yourself think or say, "That is so out of order. You're winding me up. Why are you doing that? You're being very naughty now." Now, I've certainly said those things before, and they tend to come out of our mouths when someone else's behaviour pushes our buttons. We get some big feelings and we struggle to understand why on earth someone could behave that way. It just doesn't make sense to us.
There is a way to make sense of it though, and it can really help us to get unstuck in those difficult situations. That way is to see all behaviour as a gift.
Now, that's an interesting idea, and I think a lot of people would say it can't be that simple. There's a whole lot of behaviour that would be very difficult to see as any sort of gift, at least not a welcome one.
I know it sounds unusual, doesn't it? How could things like shouting and banging doors and punching walls and being withdrawn possibly be a gift, right? Let's give it a go though. Here's a gift, Millie. It's full of all sorts of behaviour, and we're going to open it up, and whatever is in the box, we're going to take a pause, take a deep breath, and just look at it and wonder what it's about.
And before we do that, let's share another idea that goes along with this and might help to explain what we mean. This is a big thing to get your head round. So this man, Professor Ross Green, has written a number of books that help to better understand children's behaviour, particularly the difficult stuff. His simple idea is that all children want to do well, and they do well if they can. And that sounds like common sense, doesn't it? So what's the big revelation?
It does sound like common sense until we remember that most of us grew up with and were schooled in the idea that if children didn't do well or behave well, it was because they didn't want to, and that the job of parents and teachers was to motivate them to do well through reward or punishment. Professor Green turns that on its head and says that they don't do well when they can't do well, and it's because they are lacking a skill, not the will to do so.
So he's saying that children really do want to behave well. It's just that sometimes they don't have the skills to be able to. And they're skills like problem solving, managing their emotions, or communicating clearly what they need. This is helpful to know because it means instead of feeling so angry or worried about bad behaviour, we can shift to being curious about what it is that a child might be trying to tell us about how to make things better.
He also talks about how big feelings like fear, anger, shame and frustration can all effectively shut down our ability to think clearly and make good, calm decisions. Those big feelings trigger our fight, flight or freeze response that helps us to survive danger. All of our instincts kick in. Everything has to operate on shortcuts and get us out of danger, and in those moments we simply can't work stuff out rationally, express ourselves clearly or respond to situations calmly. We've got adrenaline coursing through our bloodstream and it switches off our higher brain functions. However, pausing, taking a deep breath and letting ourselves slow down really does help us to respond more calmly when somebody else is upset or angry.
Which brings us back to the idea that all behaviour is a gift, even the difficult stuff that pushes our buttons. When in that moment the other person can't manage their big feelings or solve a problem that's frustrating them or tell us clearly what's going on for them, it will come out in a way that doesn't make sense. And it can help if we try and work out what they need rather than react to their behaviour at face value.
When we're learning new ideas and new skills ourselves, it helps to start with the small stuff and practice until we feel confident enough to tackle the bigger things. So, when you're practicing this at home in your family, start with the behaviours that are less button pushing for you, so your own big feelings don't get in the way of working out what's going on. The reason that things get out of control when we're arguing is that one person gets into that fight, flight, freeze mode. And if we think that they are doing that stuff deliberately, then our brain clicks into the fight, flight, freeze mode too. And then we end up in a spiral and then we get really stuck. Okay, let's take a look in the box now and see if we can give some examples of what we're talking about here.
So imagine a hedgehog. We can think about a hedgehog rolled up in a spiky little ball. No one can get in. That's a pretty clear go away, leave me alone, I will hurt you if you get too close kind of message, isn't it? Now, when children and young people behave that way, it does hurt, doesn't it? Like they're rejecting us and shutting us out. What if we let ourselves get curious about that behaviour and wonder what's going on? Why do hedgehogs roll up in tight, spiky balls?
Because they see danger, because they're frightened of something and they think they need to protect themselves from it. And when they hibernate too, those times when they haven't got a lot of energy and they need to slow down, they hide out for the winter and they wait for spring.
In the same way, when people behave in that withdrawn, spiky way, maybe they're scared of something and feel like they need to protect themselves. Or they might really need a long rest from the stresses of life until the weather gets better out there.
Here's another example. We often think of bears roaring and being fierce or aggressive. That might seem a bit harder to accept as a gift, of course. And we're not asking anyone to accept aggression or shouting. What we're saying is, after practicing on some easier scenarios, try and be curious about what that bear behaviour that you see in others means.
Real bears behave that way for good reason. They might be defending something important to them from attack. They might be letting other bears know they're there, being heard and recognised. They might be injured or in pain. It might be really hungry and trying to get some food.
And, like the hedgehog, people behaving like bears might be trying to protect something important to them, or they might be in pain, or they might be hungry. By taking a pause, that deep breath, and wondering what the gift is behind the behaviour, we can see others through kinder eyes and not get so readily caught up in those spirals of conflict. Our next film will help you figure out these gifts in more detail. The top tip for now is to pause, take a deep breath, and wonder what's really going on when you feel upset with other people's behaviour.